All right, welcome back to another edition of the Ohio State of Mind podcast. I'm your host, Michael Chen. On the other side of me is Joshua Keatley. It is June 5th, Wednesday, 2020. And we got a little bit of recruiting action yesterday. The Buckeyes scored a big recruiting win as they kept in-state running back Bo Jackson from going to the SEC. The two main competitors were Alabama and Georgia for his commitment. This comes a couple days following his official visit to Ohio State as well. So I think they hit it out of the park there, Josh. What are your thoughts initially on the commitment of Bo Jackson?
Yeah, man, it's very exciting. It's exciting. So again, I want to reiterate before I dive too far in the weeds here. You're more or less the recruiting expert on the show. You're the one that watches these kids from when they're sophomores on up. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I've seen a bunch of his highlights. I ain't sat down and watched a full game. I don't do that until pen meets paper. With the day and age of the transfer portal and NIL, I don't want to waste time doing it. But for the tone of the recruiting class, the tone and the momentum of the running back room, and what it means. You know, you and I were texting, and you mentioned talking about Tony Alford and all that. And this is a big
Uh,
step to showing that Carlos Lachlan is going to improve the running back room. That they're not
sure.
going to lose a step. That he's going to be able to bring in the big dogs. He's going to be able to bring in the big dogs in his own backyard. All that good stuff. I don't want to overreact too much because, again, it is an Ohio guy,
Sure.
right? You should get those guys. That should be the expectation. Going back to
Right.
Beanie Wells, Maurice Claret. I mean, it goes on. And Archie
Right.
Griffin, right? Ohio. You go
Of
to Ohio,
course.
and you're a big time running back. You should
Sure.
rock and roll at
Sure.
Ohio State.
Sure. We could talk about
But I
Brandon
think it's
Sane.
good news. Yeah, yeah, Brandon said. But that's good news because this is a guy that was kind of on edge. I mean, I know you saw it. There were a lot of it's always fun to kind of swim around in the Michigan waters of social media, and a lot of people thought that was going to be their bag, that was going to be their
Right.
guy, and it's not. It's so
Right.
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. For a good portion of his recruitment, it looked like he was trending away from Ohio State. I do actually think that has to do a lot with Tony Alford and his recruiting philosophy. And Carlos Lachlan, like you said, came in and kind of turned his recruitment around. He's a personable guy. He didn't grow up in a football family. I believe he's like a security guard or a police officer prior to entering the coaching world. And I think players like tough love, and he definitely gives that tough love. If you watch today, there was a couple of practice clips that hit social media. On top of that, there was a camp as well, and he's coaching the camp, trying to figure out whether or not guys are worthy of offers. And everything that I saw regarding his coaching style, it's he pushes players, and that is exactly in line with Ryan Day's philosophy. Iron sharpens the best of the best. They want all of those guys to push them. I mean, the wide receivers talk about it all the time. Garrett Wilson said something. I wrote a piece on Buckeyes Wire about that last week, about how Garrett Wilson was like, look, you have a guy make a play and everyone cheers him on, but then you want to make a better play than him on the next rep. And I think that definitely carries over. I don't think that's just one position that Ohio State's trying to achieve that goal with. I think that's across the board. And when you look, especially when you look at the depth chart, that's something to me that really stood out. You know, Trevion Henderson will exhaust his eligibility at the end of the year. We all assume that Quinshon Judkins also, although he still has 1 year of eligibility remaining, we all expect him to leave off the NFL too, because as we know,
Possible.
running back careers, yeah, right. I mean, I'd say like it's 90% that he leaves at the current. Because look at the landscape of the NFL, and especially with running backs, you're talking about a career that's lasting 2 to 5 years. So that window of opportunity to make money is very
Yeah,
small. So you have to capitalize
yeah,
on it.
you're
And
right. I mean, I didn't mean it as a point of
sure,
I didn't mean it as like it's like to try to argue, but I just merely meant like this time last year we were kind of saying the same thing about Travion,
right,
and he ended up stuck
right. No,
in
that's true.
today's age
That's true.
of NIL and not somebody a running back not taking on a full load of carries. You
Right.
don't really know what's going to happen. Chances are he is going to leave, but there does need to be an asterisk there. I think a little bit.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, there's
You know,
always a chance.
yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's always a chance, but more focus on Jackson here. The running back room is going to be light. You do expect both of them to lead. I'd definitely be surprised. If Ohio State wins a championship this year, I think it's a shoe in. I think he's off to the NFL. If they don't, it's still questionable whether he would come back or not. The precedence is there. They've said it. It's been set for since Mike Doss kind of did it. Back in 2001 when he spurned the NFL after his junior year, where he's probably a first round pick, and then comes back to win a championship in 2002. So it's there. It's been there, and it's not just this isn't just the first time that this has happened. It's happened multiple times before that, and it happens all across the country. Some guys who you're like, oh, this guy's a shoe in for a first round pick, says, you know what, actually I like college and I'm going to stay. I'm never going to get the opportunity to experience this
Right.
again. And I want to go through another season. So yes, I would agree with you on that there is the door is not closed. That's really what I'm getting at. The door is not closed. But again, back to
Yeah.
Jackson. I think that this recruitment, along with some of the other running backs that Ohio State's recruiting as well, Jordan Davidson, he's another guy that's extremely high in the list. Look, they need 2, maybe 3 running backs because most likely you're looking at Judkins and Henderson moving on. You've got James People, Sam Williams-Dixon still there on scholarship. It's going to be a light room. It wouldn't surprise me for Ohio State to add in a veteran running back through the portal next year. I don't think that would be out of the question or out of the ordinary. I think that actually is a strong possibility just because the youth. You're looking at 2 guys who I think will play this year, but how much run are they actually going to get? What Peoples might get 50, 60 carries. Williams-Dixon might get 30, 25. I don't know, So you'd be really, really green going into the 25 season. I don't think Ryan Day really wants that. Especially out of a position where it's integral to the Ohio State offense. You need that kind of running back so that the safeties can't just play back and defend the wide receivers. You got to have that versatility in your offense. You can't just be one way. And I think that this recruitment was huge. I watched Bo Jackson's film earlier today. I'm very impressed. The dude's got exceptional vision. On top of that, he's like huge. I mean, he's 6 foot, 205 pounds right now. He's still got another year of high school. I could see him enrolling like 210, 215, not losing any of the speed. I do believe he's like a 4.5 guy, so he's not like a burner, but you couldn't tell me that. I would if I didn't know that information after watching his highlight tape, I probably would have said he's probably closer to a 4.4 kind of guy because he's just literally like you watch his tape and it's 8 minutes of him just running by everybody and nobody getting angles to catch it. It's just it's awesome. It's a huge recruiting win for Ohio State, because like I said earlier, you would lose him to an SEC school. Yeah, you wouldn't have to face off against him, until potentially the college football playoff. But a guy like that in your own backyard, you have to keep. The best in Ohio, stay in Ohio, right? And so, in my eyes, it's a huge recruiting win for the Buckeyes, and I'm very excited about what's to come for Jackson when he eventually signs and puts on that uniform.
Yeah, and again, I try not to put too much stock. The verbal commitment, you got to take it with kind of a grain of salt, right? I know, as Ohio State fans, and it's kind of the dead period where anything could happen. But the most important thing for a guy like me, who's kind of like, okay, hey, I don't really know this guy as a player yet. I know the hype around him. I know where his recruiting ranking stands. I know the running back room is kind of in flux. I know that this is not a position that we've recruited very strongly recently. Obviously Trey Van Henderson's the exception to that rule.
Sure.
But this is a good sign, right? It's kind of the first big thing that Carlos Loughlin has done since he's been the coach of that position group. And again, I want to be very careful not to give him too much credit because this guy is a guy from his backyard, right? It's not like he flipped somebody from Georgia or something crazy like that. But it's cool. It's good news, if you will. I didn't know if you wanted to move the discussion because technically we are in June at this point,
Sure.
but you mentioned him signing, obviously we're talking about December, but if certain rules get passed, he could sign technically in a couple of weeks. Obviously that's not gonna happen this year, but we might be having a different conversation next year if certain rules pass. I don't know if you want to dive into that though, your thoughts on that.
Yeah, let's get into it because this the college football landscape is always changing. There's always something that's, little pieces are moving here and there. High school wise, when you're looking at, NIL with high school kids, I saw that Florida, I believe it was yesterday, they announced that high school athletes can now sign NIL deals. Some states don't do it. The state of Ohio is one that does not currently allow it. Now, Ohio they're working on it though. Like, let's be real here. They're working on it. They realized that, the 7-on-7 portion of it needed to change, and they changed that this year, right? So
it shouldn't take this long.
I agree with you. Look, I'm 100% in that ballpark. I definitely think that it is taking way too long. But
and for the record, I'm predominantly like when it comes to all this NIL and paying the players things, I was pretty much against that. I'm a pretty old school guy, and I'm not really for that kind of stuff. But you can't. It's happening. That's the reality of the situation. We need to accept it. Let's move on. In Ohio, Ohio being this late to the ball game, if they don't hurry up, it's going to cause issues. We already saw Chris Henry Jr. move out to California to try to take advantage of this rule because he couldn't take advantage of it in Ohio. Next thing you know, guys like Tavion St. Clair, they're only going to be able to stay in Ohio for so long before you start to see those dollar signs and leave. So, I want to be very clear. I was against the NIL thing, but the fact that it's taken this long for Ohio to figure it out, not good. Not a good sign.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think that they're behind the ball. I think the next step on the agenda is allowing spring football. I think that, when you look at a lot of the southern states, they allow spring football. Ohio does not. And I think that they're, starting to realize that, hey, you know what? Some of our rules regarding high school athletics are extremely archaic and it needs to change. And, with a potential new signing day, it has to change. It really does. They're hindering players from, especially like some of the best high school players, from making money due to, their name, image, and likeness. And, it definitely makes a lot of sense to me that the state is going to start realizing that they're not with it. And it's there, but unfortunately it's slow. It's inch by inch, and you have to take wins when they come. That 7-on-7 thing. It was great to see them realize that, hey, you know what? This is a dumb rule. It doesn't make sense. It's 7-on-7 is not real football. Let's be completely transparent with it. It's not real football. It's more like it's a touch game.
Flag football.
Yeah, it's flag football. It's pretty much what it is. And to not allow the kids to go and play in those tournaments and participate when and especially now with social media, all these kids know each other. They all talk to each other. They have group chats, etc. So it's not like back in the day where you've got a recruit that's in Texas or one in California, and they don't know each other because they don't go to they don't see each other at any events. All they do is they do local stuff. Well, now there's so many national events that these young players go to that it's changed the game. And also social media changed the game. obviously having cell phones, being able to text and all of that changes the game.
Right.
So, I think that Ohio specifically, they definitely need to make an adjustment to some of their rules. Like we talked about, I'd love to see them allow spring football. On top of that, getting the NIL action for the high school students too. But I know we've kind of segregated away from what we were initially trying to talk about. So let's get back to this new signing day. So Josh, what are
Yes.
your thoughts? What are your initial thoughts on potentially having? And I'm not 100% sure. Would this get rid of the early signing period, or would there now be
No.
3 signing periods?
So the rule that's being proposed. So first of all, there's 2 rules I've been really heavily focused on recently. This rule is the first rule was the coaches rule, talking about there being unlimited amount of coaches on the field, but still
Sure.
limiting how many coaches you have on the trail of recruiting. And maybe we'll touch on that when we have some time. But the rule I want to talk about now is that they're talking about making their 3rd signing period, which would kick off on June 25th and last for 4 days or whatever. And then July would be basically your dead period. And then you'd have another signing day in December. And then obviously the signing day in February, which at that point would be non-existent, right? For
It's pretty
instance,
much
you have
non-existent as it is already.
exactly. So it's kind of silly, because Ohio State wraps up their class. They had one guy sign on actual signing day, 2 guys maybe. So it was kind of
One guy,
silly.
and then I think they announced the transfers that day as well. So yeah.
Yeah, so and if you're a team like Ohio State, for instance, if the signing day was at the end of this month, you'd probably already have half your class, right? You'd have about 15 dudes that
Yeah,
would
they got
probably be willing to pen to
I think
paper.
12 or 13. I think 13, actually
Yeah,
13 with
and
Jackson
at
now.
that point too, you're right. So they got 2 guys that are hard committed, and then at that point, if this was a real rule, you would assume that they'd put gun to head on some of these recruits. Probably could have used a better a better example, but and probably would get their signatures as well. So about 15, which would be half the class. Then you get 6 in December.
Sure.
I for one am against it. The reason why I'm against it is I was against the early recruiting, the signing day, the first time it was passed.
Sure.
I'm used to recruiting being. I don't like recruiting being the focal point of the football season, right? It should be a kind of a secondary thing. Like these guys are coming in for
Sure.
visits. Hey, football's over. It's kind of like the NFL draft, right? They sign their papers. February rolls around or January, they early, you have your early, you can still have your early enrollees. I've never had anything against that. I think that's a really cool
Sure.
idea. If you graduate early, you deserve that opportunity. But having it in June to me means that the recruiting cycle is even harder. It's longer. It takes the focus away. I don't like it. Now you're asking these kids who are already flip flopping like crazy, especially in the NIL era, to make a decision sooner, because we all know that Ohio, like teams like Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, they push to get those kids to sign that paper as soon as possible, right?
Right.
We're seeing now in the day and age of the transfer portal NIL of guys backing out of that letter of intent. We saw that letter of intent. We saw it with Rashada at Florida. We saw it with Julian Sand this past year at Alabama. Now you're going to push that to June before coaches are fired, before coaches are hired, before the transfer portals, before guys have announced their intention to go to the transfer football. This is in 2024 college football. Teams change so quickly from week 1 to December. And now you're talking about June. I mean, the Ohio State football team is going to be a completely different team by the time December rolls around. And that includes the coaches. I mean, you know what I mean? So if you're a guy, let's use Bo Jackson, for example. If you're Bo Jackson, you sign a letter of intent on the 15th and Ryan Day gets fired. Okay. Well, that really blows for that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now you got to, and they're not going to, that you would assume that the people that are smarter than us that are making these rules would have thought about that, right? So it's much like the transfer thing. Like, okay, well, if a coach gets fired, well, then he can back out of his letter of intent. Okay. What happens if a positional coach gets fired? What happens if a coordinator gets fired? Oh, well, then we can get back out of the letter of intent. Well, you're going to have, it just doesn't make any sense. You're opening up a can of worms that doesn't need it. It doesn't make any sense. You're putting pressure on these kids that are making bad decisions constantly, that aren't prepared. They're going into their last year of high school. They're still juniors. I don't like it at all, in my opinion.
I'm kind of in the middle ground of this. I always kind of I would have rather have seen the early signing period be this early. So if this is the proposal, I'd rather them can that December signing period, keep this one, have the fourth or the first Wednesday of February. And my reason being is because there it's twofold. During this early signing period, it's right in the middle. It's or I wouldn't say right in the middle, but it's closer to conference championship games, closer to getting prepared for bowl games, college football
You know
playoff.
what, the December one?
Yes, the December one. Correct. Right.
Well, right.
It's
Well,
just
let's take that
it's
one out of it because we both agree the December one sucks. The December one
yeah,
makes most
it
sense.
sucks.
We
Right.
both agree on that.
Exactly.
But
That's
why
that's what
would
I'm
the
saying.
June one? But why do you need the
I think
June? Why can't you just have it the old way?
I think that
Why
at
does the
this
June
point
one
in
make it better?
time, some guys just want to get the process over. Some guys don't want to be contacted by coaches. Some guys are just done. And that's one of the reasons why they verbal so. If you want to continue the process, you say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna make my decision after my high school season. Okay, cool. That's perfectly fine. You do you, right? But I think that some guys are just so locked in, they're just ready to go, that it doesn't
Yeah.
matter whether it's now, then, whenever. I think those guys would sign anyways. You're talking about
Okay.
like there's certain guys in my eyes that are just like, they're so firmly committed to Ohio State that it just doesn't matter at this point in time. It
So
really doesn't. Like I think like
let's
Tavion St. Clair,
okay.
Devin Sanchez, like Carter Lowe, three of the top recruits in the 25 class right now. I think that those guys would just be like, I'm done. This is it. I'm good with my decision. I'm gonna sign early, right? And
Okay.
with that, with the proposal of that June signing period, then they could sign. Now, I would also have a caveat that says if the head coach moves on, then you're able to be released from your binding scholarship. I think that they have to work that in, just like how it is right now. Now
But
it's
you
more of like now I think you have to apply for a waiver now because not all
yeah.
teams, and you have to think about it this way
But
as
the
well,
reason you're
right?
applying for that, the reason they make you apply for that waiver is because by the time signing period comes around in December, most teams have already made their choices, right?
Sure.
You guys are
Right.
fired by the you typically know who your coach is going to be,
Right.
right?
Right.
So that's the whole issue that I have with it. You're saying that you agree that they would have to have some kind of asterisk where like, hey, I
Sure.
signed this letter of intent, but if someone and where how far does it go? I know that you said head coach, but do you allow them to get out of it if the coordinator is fired?
No,
Do you
I
allow
don't think
them?
so.
So the guy, see that's another issue because I don't think that that's fair either. Because if you're a wide receiver, Brian Hartline's the one you're talking to. You're talking to
Right.
Brian Hartline, or if Bo Jackson's talking to Carlos Loughlin, way more than he's talking to Ryan Day, right? So how can
Yeah.
you make that rule if Ryan Day gets canned, but not if Carlos Loughlin gets canned? Does that make sense? I just feel like it's really sticky. And even if we did do it by the head coach, let's say you sign your letter of intent, your head coach gets canned. Okay, well, a healthy chunk of dudes get canned every year, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
we see mass exodus now when coaches leave and everybody
Sure.
follows them, right? You saw that with James Madison, all those guys going to Indiana,
Sure.
and you see that a lot with recruits too. But the thing is, you don't see it now with recruits on pen and paper because they're not committing, they're not putting pen on paper until all that process is over. But you see guys flip all the time because of that change. Now you're getting now you're throwing in basically additional legalese because you've signed a contract. So now you got to get a waiver,
So
right?
when
And it causes
so then what's the
and
timeline that
it
you would
causes a
feel like
ripple effect as
appropriate
well.
then? So what
Oh, I'm
timeline
sorry,
would
what's
you
that?
feel what timeline would you feel that would be appropriate to have an early signing period? If because
I don't.
obviously you're not a fan of it, and I get that. But
It's
if you
not that
were
I'm not.
to
It's not that I'm not a fan of it. It's just that I'm not a fan of it. But it's not because I hate the idea. It's just because there's going to be such a large percentage of these guys, even if the percentage is small, right? You said, oh, these guys are locked in. Even if one of those 12 dudes decides to back out 4 months from now, that causes a ripple effect that I don't think is necessary because you don't have to deal with that, right? Even if you're a locked in player, and the bad outweighs the good, right? Because
Sure.
the guys that you are helping, the guys that don't want to be bothered by coaches, first of all, we all know that the amount of kids, most of these kids want to take their visits and want to get the free food and the free club because you want to. I mean, I was a
Of
shitty
course,
football player and
once
I
in a
wanted to do
lifetime
that.
opportunity. Once in a lifetime
Yeah, I mean,
opportunity.
I was doing that with D3
Sure.
schools. It's a fun thing to do, right? So that the list of guys that you're talking about is very, very, very small. And we've seen guys say, put in their Twitter profile, "Don't contact me" or whatever. Whether that works or not, I don't know. But another thing too is if you really think that signing your letter of intent in June is going to stop tampering, I think that Caden Proctor would disagree with that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that that's going to stop anybody. The only thing it's going to add is additional red tape and additional confusion, additional ripple effects for dudes once coaching changes happen and the transfer portal and all that madness. I don't think that I'm not a fan of either early signing period.
Right.
I wouldn't have an early signing period at all. It's
I get that.
unnecessary. Why are we making these 17-year-old kids who I don't who barely know how to drive making these decisions this early? It makes no sense. Then we're talking about a sport where the transfer portal is so abundant that like 6 quarterbacks in the entire conference were original commits to the team that they're playing on now. And you want to make these guys sign earlier? I mean, I can't. I'm trying to think of a quarterback that's in the big. Drew Aller is the best quarterback in the Big Ten that didn't have to transfer. Think about that. You know what I mean? Like that's what you want those guys to commit sooner. It makes no sense. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's unnecessary. I think what they're trying to do is the college football is getting greedy and they're trying to dominate the news cycle. I don't know. I don't understand. I don't understand where this is coming from. Or they're trying, I don't know who's pushing this. Maybe it's someone that feels like this is going to give them an edge NIL wise. I don't know. I just don't understand. I think the cons far outweigh the pros.
Sure. Well,
I mean, not for us as fans because it's cool to write them down, have an idea, or whatever.
Of course.
For the grand scheme of college football.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get where you're coming from, and for me personally, the way I see it is with the early signing period, you get an opportunity to just get it done, work on what you need to work on. You get like across the nation, as you talked about earlier, the early enrollees are it's commonplace now. A lot of times you're gonna get like a third to half of your guys, enrolling early, and they enroll in January, right? So if you kept that signing period, just in February, I think a lot of players wouldn't be able to get that done. So I think that kind of hinders some of the players.
Wouldn't be able to enroll early.
Yeah.
No, you
because
still you've always been able to enroll early.
They have,
Yeah.
But I think it's you're going to have to jump a couple more hoops
in
order to do. Right. So, yeah, not always. I think
so,
like
whatever, sure.
Right. So I'm all for an early signing period. I just don't think that having it, the December one doesn't make sense timeline wise. I think that, in season obviously wouldn't make sense. I think that something closer to August would make a lot more sense. Right at the beginning of the year, you're ready to go. You can lock in some of your commitments, to their scholarships. You'll know exactly what your numbers going. Pardon me. You'll know exactly what your number is going to be going forward. Obviously, it can change a little bit with transfers and all that. But I personally, I like the early signing period. I don't like the timing of it. I think that needs to change. Having 3 signing periods, I think is too much. I'm in agreement with you on that. I feel like a signing period, what was it? August, so 6 months, right? 6 months is good. I think that's legit. I think that's okay. June is 8 months, right? June's a little bit too long, I think. I just don't
So what? So let me ask you this: so if you sign your letter of intent in August,
Sure.
let's say we play by your rules. What is that? If I sign my letter of intent, so that means I'm done. I can no longer go on official visits. I can no
Yeah,
longer go on visits.
because the calendar has changed. They allow official visits in the summer now. So you can make a lot of players are making all their official visits now. I mean, Ohio State just had 10 guys take official visits over this past weekend.
So what?
Right?
And again, your rule would say that,
and they're having more. Right, they're having more this coming weekend as well,
right.
because
I
the
understand.
recruiting calendar has changed. A lot of these guys can
Right.
go on unofficial visits when they're sophomores and
So
get that game day
who does?
experience.
Let me ask you this: who does that rule benefit?
I think it benefits
Does
the
it
player.
benefit?
I think it does.
How does
I
it
think
benefit
benefits
the player?
because that way
How
they
does
can
it
get it
benefit the
out.
player?
They can get it out of the way. They don't have to worry about it anymore. They can just say, you know what,
But
I'm
they can
locked in.
sign it later. Nothing changes with the player. They can sign that later.
Yeah, I get it, but
Does
not
that make,
everyone's going
to
to.
me,
But not
the only
everyone
one
would
that's
sign in that period. You give them the option to do it. If they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. That pretty much tells the coaching staff that they're not committed to the program.
To me, it feels like the only person that benefits from this situation are the colleges, because they're pressuring 17-year-old kids to making decisions before they have to. They're now again furthering how fast that they can pressure these kids to sign this contract, because that's what it is now. Because NIL's involved, it's a contract, and pretty soon they're going to be paid employees, and it's going to be harder for them to get out of. It doesn't. I get, this kid can sign early and get it out of the way. I mean, that kid can get a new phone number. There's way, you know what I mean? Like, the biggest person that benefits are these colleges, so that they can get those scholarships out there, be done, and recruit for the next year. That's the other thing too. Oh, that changes that whole timeline too. Because if you have the 2024 class or 2025 class done by August, and then you got the 2026 class lined up, we're already seeing them talk to kids in the 2026 class.
27 class as well. 27s,
is that going to change too? Because if you got, that's what I'm saying. It feels like it's going to cause a ripple effect that's not going to help these kids. You're going to have them sign a contract, and we don't know who the coaching staff. And then my other question was, what, based off of what's your rule going to be? Is your rule going to be head coach and you can get out of it?
Yeah.
Or are you going to go down to the positional coach?
I would say it's head coach, because really that's who you're committing to, right?
No, you're talking to your positional coach more.
I think you're committing to a program as opposed to, every time. So, a couple of years ago when I was working for Prep Red Zone and I was talking to all these high school athletes on how they should go about the recruiting process, I always told them this: don't pick a school because of football. Pick a school that you would go to if football was not involved. Because football is going to end. You could have a career-ending injury tomorrow and never play again.
But dude,
you're going to have to go to school. You're going to have to go to school then, right?
Well, so I understand that, right?
Yeah.
But you're, and that's what you're saying is 100% correct. But when you're telling that to a 17-year-old, do you think they're listening, or is Justin Scott going to take a big duffel bag full of cash and go down to Miami, who hasn't won a bowl game in 10 years? What's going to happen? Tell me what's going to happen.
I know for a fact, and I'm not going to disclose what happened, that wasn't his highest offer at Miami. I know for a fact.
Either way, we know that is how recruiting goes. Even before the day and age of NIL, dudes were going to they would ask kids why they chose Oregon, and they would talk about the jerseys. These are 17-year-old kids. These are 18-year-old kids, dude. Like, they're way more focused on grabbing titty and getting cash than school, and that's fine. I was like that. You know what I mean? Like, we know that that's wrong, but it feels to me that it benefits the school more than the kid, coming from someone who's as old school as I and disagrees with the NIL and paying them, the last thing I want to see is for them to be taking advantage of high school kids. And they talk to the positional coach way more than they talk to the head coach. Way more. I think you would be. I don't think that you can. Yeah, so I think if you had to, you would have to make the rule the positional coach, and my God, would that be a mess? My God, would that be a mess?
Yeah, that
We'll
gets
see
really
though, because
sticky.
it's probably
That's
gonna
why.
happen.
That's what I'm saying. It's got to be the head coach. That's that's kind of what I'm getting at. It's got to be the head coach because you're right. It's going to get really sticky if they jump down position coaches and coordinators. Like that's really like those guys move all over the place and all the time.
I know, but you have to feel bad for the kid. I mean, we saw Dallin Hayden was really upset about the Tony Alford situation. I don't
Sure.
know. Maybe we'll try to reach out to an older Buckeye to see what their thoughts are on the recruiting process and who they talk to. I also don't like the idea of unlimited coaches either, because that to me is also smushing the little guy. Boise
Yeah.
State is so now you're going to have guys that were offensive coordinators at MAC schools be assistant wide receiver coach coaches at Ohio State. Because that's
Yeah.
what you're talking about when you have unlimited coaches, right? What's to stop that? What's to stop Brian Hartline from having an assistant who has play calling on his resume at a MAC school? I mean, right? Wouldn't you do
Sure.
that if you're Ohio State?
No. Yeah. No. I mean, yeah,
You
definitely. That I
you're
don't like
already
that
seeing
rule
guys
either.
like yeah.
Yeah, I don't like that rule. They're also talking about getting rid of walk-ons. I don't like that rule, trimming down the roster as well. I think was it
Yeah.
105 right now? 105 right now, 85 scholarships. So you're looking at 30 guys that are non-scholarship guys who definitely help the program. I mean, hell,
Well,
you
that'll
had you have a guy like Xavier Johnson who wasn't on scholarship. I believe he was his senior year, but prior to that, he wasn't, and he had to work for it. And eventually, he showed that he was good enough, and he played enough, and he was,
yep.
he's absolutely, like when he got the ball in his hands, and he was electric. And a guy like that wouldn't have ever had the opportunity if they got rid of him. So I
Dude,
don't like that. I don't like that rule. I don't like that proposal either.
yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff that college football is like trying to be edgy and trying to especially with
What
the college football playoff and potential more
yep.
more games. You're looking at like kind of like an NFL schedule. I just don't like the fact that they're really trying to kind of get rid of some of the traditions that you have, and I don't like. I've
What
always been a proponent of paying the players. I always thought that was the right move, especially considering how much money colleges make off of these players, and for them not to get any. I've always been in that camp of pay the player, get them some money. They
right.
deserve it because they're
And it's
bringing
not
in millions of dollars.
right. And it's not, and I want to be very clear too, because I always sound like an old guy when I say that I'm against NIL and all that. It's not that I'm against paying the players. I understand what they're bringing and what's happening, right? I see the fans in the stands, I see the jerseys, all that. But when you go to college, it's kind of back to what you're saying. You want to go to a college that you want to be at, right? College comes first, football comes second. Well, when money is such a major equation, it's not that's gone. That's not the main focus anymore, right? Second of all, it takes away from the college experience. I mean, I'm sure you have stories too. I remember walking into house parties and the football player, grabbing the hottest chick and leaving. Like I know that's so they're a college life or getting into the bars, cutting in line and stuff like that. That their college life is already disassociated before NIL, but now they're driving around in Lamborghinis and banging models and stuff. It's like, well, they're not even college students anymore. Right? They're not
Well,
going to
yeah,
college parties.
college has
You know,
become the semi-professional, which I always thought
that's what
that
I'm
that's
saying.
how it.
Yeah,
I've always thought
and
that
that's
that's kind of how it should be. At 18 years
see, I
old,
disagree.
at less than 18, you could start, a YouTube page. What's the name of that kicker from I can't remember where he went, but
De La Hoya.
is that the one that started his own YouTube channel and the NCAA
Yeah,
said
he
no?
got hurt. Yeah, he
Right.
like
Yeah,
snapped his
like
neck a couple weeks ago in the NFL. Yeah.
yes, he did because he was going crazy, right? Yeah. So like a guy like him, like NIL, and if he wanted to do what he was doing with a YouTube page and capitalizing on people watching it and subscribing, which you should do to our page, by the way. Um, shameless plug. Uh, but like something like that, like those guys should be able to do whatever they want because you could be
No.
like you could be 16 years old and start your
Yeah.
own stream online and make income that way. Why
Right.
couldn't you, as a student athlete, do that? So
Because
I've always been a proponent of paying the
I don't have an
always.
issue with the situation that you described. I don't have an issue with. Right, the dude's sitting at, if you know if Reese Claret wants to sit at the mall and charge $20 for an autograph or whatever, or
Sure.
it's a or whoever, like when Todd Gurley got busted for selling
Right.
his autograph. I have no problem with that too. Right, I
Right.
have no problem with these guys.
Johnny Manziel, same. Right.
Whatever. Yeah, I got no problem with that. But now what has happened is it's kind of like what you're saying with the recruiting thing, with the recruiting window. You allow something like that and it turns into something completely different, right? It allow you, because that was the whole focus of NIL. Hey, some of these guys are struggling. I think Javon Kinlaw, the defensive tackle of South Carolina, they talked about him like,
Right.
stealing food or whatever. Like, and I understand that, right? But it goes from that and that story to greasy old dudes boosters lining these pockets, lying to the kid. Now you're dealing with Rashida, who's suing Florida because him and his father were dumb enough to believe that he was worth $13 million. That's the
Right.
kind of shit you're dealing with. That's the opposite end of the spectrum. So you're right. I agree with what you're saying, but that's not what's happening, right? It's always like the thing with the best intentions you have to think of the
Sure.
worst possible scenario. And that's what we're dealing with. And that's what's happened, right? Now that NIL is available, these guys are professionals. So now what do? Well, you have to limit your roster size because you can't pay them all that biggest salaries, and you got to get rid of the walk-ons because you can't have free employees. You can't have free employees in the same building as guys who get paid. That doesn't make any sense,
I mean,
right? So now you're going to lose
if
guys.
they're getting revenue share, then technically they wouldn't be free. They'd still be getting a piece.
Maybe, but if that's the case, why is it being brought up? Why is the walk-on? Why is it? I mean, people are pretty confident that walk-ons are pretty much going to be gone in 5 years, right? That's what you're hearing. That's what I'm hearing.
Which
Yeah,
sucks.
and the root of all of that is the allowance for these guys to get paid. And again, I want to be very clear. I have no problem with these guys making money. I have a problem with who's giving the money, how much money is being provided, who's being left out of that money, the decisions that are being made with that money. It's all the negative stuff that comes with it. That's the issue. Just like I don't have a problem with the kid signing, a guy like Tavion Sinclair. That's the perfect example for a kid. Even if Ryan Day gets fired, Tavion Sinclair is going to Ohio State. I have no problem with that kid signing early, but the problem is there's going to be one of him and 10 dudes who aren't like him that sign it and make a mistake.
Sure.
We're still dealing with children. That's what we're
Right.
dealing with. You know what I mean? These guys, most of them can't legally drink, right? So that's they're just getting taken advantage of. It's just a weird situation. So I don't mind them getting paid. We kind of got off on a tangent because I feel like I had to defend myself because I feel like an old stodgy. There's a lot of negativity.
This is part of the conversation. It's part of the conversation with moving a new signing period in June. If they were to do it's definitely relevant.
Open up, and once you take the toothpaste out, you're not putting it back in, bro. Just like the NIL. The NIL, it wasn't organized. It's not organized, and it's going to be so hard. It's going to be so hard to organize by the time, because you can't be like, all right, we've hooked up, everybody's going to get wet, because now there's guys getting $5 million with Panini and Dr. Pepper and all that. You can't stop it now. You can't tell these guys that they can make less, right? It's always got to be more. You can't take money out of your pocket. That's why I was hesitant to put money in the pocket, because once you put it in there, it's gone. That's their money. You know what I mean? And it's going to be it's an absolute mess.
Yeah, I mean they are playing with fire with potential another signing period, but I think they're trying to figure out how this is going to work in the long run. The early signing period obviously is fairly new. I believe it's it's heading into its third year. So, to me, they're still working out some of their issues with it, and I'm okay with an early signing period, but I would, like I said, I would get rid of that December signing period. I'd have an earlier, say August, and then have it in the the first Wednesday of February. That's how I would do it personally. But it's a fine line, like you said, especially with the coaches. That it's very difficult to know who actually is going to be your coach. If you were to sign in August, like say the NFL comes calling for Ryan Day and offers him $15 million
Yeah.
a year to coach a team. Like, can he turn that down? Like,
Well, that everything you're describing, and that's why I said I don't necessarily disagree with it. It's that everything you're describing is if ever in a perfect world, what you're describing is perfect, right? In a perfect world, what you're describing works well, but it's just call me a
it's not
pessimist. There's going to be enough annoying shit that causes disruptions with it that I'd rather keep everything the same. And maybe that's why I would never change anything ever, because I just, but it's just, I feels like every decision that the NCAA makes and these college football teams make has this weird ripple effect that makes the sport worse, right? Like they didn't really think out these super conferences. Now we got the Pac-12 with two goddamn teams, right? And then you got the SEC who still got 8 conference games. It's just, and the seating's weird. It's just no one really thinks anything out. They just say, okay, hey, they solve the equation of how much money is this going to make us, and then they green light that shit. And it just feels like that's a bad way to do it. Like you said, it's going to be an NFL schedule soon. I don't want that either, because that's part of the thing too. I'm also not a person that's wanting to extend everything, expand everything all the time. I still think of these dudes as student athletes. The student comes first.
shit.
I would like to see with the playoffs expanded. I'm all for the playoffs being expanded to 14 teams, but you have to shorten the season, right? Because now we're getting to the point where these kids are playing football for 6 months. It's like, dude,
Right.
you know what I mean? So
Right.
it's just everything is just take, and I think it's just causing an issue with these players,
Yeah.
and that's how they justify it.
Right.
That's how they justify it, because now they're paying.
I definitely think that they rushed into some of these decisions. They really didn't
Yeah.
think them through. They should have been like, hey, look, I think we're going to do this and we're going to do it in a couple of years, but let's make sure that we get it right, that we've said it. Because
Yeah.
the playoff is it's 10 years old, right? Like the 14 playoff. And how many of those years you'd actually have teams between 5 and 12 that were like legit title contenders? I don't think there's really that.
I like the expanded playoff, right? I mean, you and I had an argument about Florida State.
Sure.
Florida State was undefeated, they didn't get in the playoff. That's a huge issue. That's a Power 5 team. They didn't get in the playoff, right? Whether you agree with it or not, and maybe they would have got blown out. I'm not even saying that they would have. I'm not saying that they would have won anything. They probably would have got blown out, but they were fucking left out, and that's wild.
Yeah.
So I have no problem with them expanding it. But even with the expansion, they have all these weird rules where, like, for the Power 4 get buys, or no, the Power 4
top four get buys unless you have another team in your conference.
Yeah, and then the highest ranked of the remainder get home field advantage. So then the next game you play in a bowl game. So if you're the 5 seed, let's say you're the 5 seed, if you're Notre Dame, right? So that's another thing too. Notre Dame can never have a bye, right? So let's say Notre Dame's the 5th seed.
And I believe also can they host?
Yeah, they can host. That's what I'm saying. So let's say Notre Dame goes undefeated. They host Liberty. Okay, not because that's let's assume it's some kind of non-power 5 as the 12th seed. It would have been Liberty last year. They beat the shit out of them 50-0, right? And I'm a small school guy, but let's just say for that's Liberty got their asses slapped by Oregon. So they win that game. Then the next week they play the lowest seeded conference champion in a neutral site bowl game. And it's like, well, shit. Let's say that, there's a huge difference between the Big Ten, the SEC, and the ACC. So let's say they play fucking Miami. Well, dude, Notre Dame's got the best playoff schedule. Like, they didn't, and that's not a huge deal, but they didn't think shit like that through. They just slapped it all together, and it's like, well, that, they do that shit constantly. It's super weird how they make decisions, and that's a very small thing, but it's true.
Agree with that. I think the ideal situation would be to get rid of conference affiliation. I don't care whether you get 2 Big Ten teams that are in the top 4, then they get a bye. I'm cool with that. If you get a Notre Dame that's in the top 4, they should get a bye. They've earned it. It doesn't make sense. Even without a conference, I understand like the rationale is you have to win a conference, but the way that it's set up, as you just explained, doesn't make sense for them to get
No,
into a conference, right? They can make the
exactly.
college football playoffs
Exactly.
virtually every single year by playing the schedule that they have, by playing 1 to 2 tough games. You split those games, you're going to come out
Sure.
11-1, right? And 11-1 is going to get you in the playoffs, like, and especially with a big brand like
That's
Notre
true.
Dame, you damn
If
well
you're
they're
Notre
going to
Dame
get.
and you get 10 wins, you're in. I mean, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you'd have to think like a 10-2 Notre Dame, wouldn't be a higher seed, but they'd be at 8, 9, 10, 12, somewhere in that range,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, I mean, the rules don't force them to enter a conference at all. Um, you know, and that again, something that we just went over. The college football uh, committee rushed into these things, didn't really think it
Yes.
through,
Yes.
should have taken a little bit more time. I would have been okay with having a 14 plan for the next 3 or 4 years while they figured it out, right? I like totally would be cool with that. I think that, there was so much of pushback about, oh, the team, especially this past year, like you mentioned with Florida State, like, oh, they should have made it, they should have been in, let's change the rules because of one time. Like that just doesn't make sense to me. I think that they should have decided that it was a little bit it's different,
But
and
but
this
here's
was more of a one-off.
but yet again, and I understand what you're saying, but here's where I again think that they rushed into even the playoff situation, right? Because that's another instance of them not knowing what the hell they were doing, right?
Sure,
Because it's not like, oh, this is a one-off. Well, no, it's the opposite. Because before that, the precedent was, if you were an undefeated Power Five school, you get in the playoffs. That was the
sure,
precedent that they set. That was basically the unwritten rule. They went undefeated. They didn't want them in because of TV ratings or whatever the reason was. They didn't want them in, and then they changed it on the fly, like they do everything. That's the issue. So I would
sure.
say that them not letting Florida State in was almost I would say them not letting Florida State in would be the better example of them making rash decisions. And now everybody's pissed because you can see the writing on the wall. That's another thing too. They'll never admit it. Just admit it. We already know that you think the ACC is shit. That was confirmation. They won the
Pretty much.
conference and you let them out. They went undefeated and you left them out. You think that
Well,
conference is
I mean,
shit.
if
The Big Ten,
Jordan Travis is healthy, they're in, right?
we don't know. What we do know
I mean, you
is that they
have to
didn't get
believe
it.
that they,
What we
right?
do
Because
know is they won
he got hurt.
the ACC.
He got hurt with 2 games left, right? The season
Here,
finale and then
here's
the
what
ACC championship.
here's what we who are they going to you think they were going to leave out the SEC team?
No, the ACC championship. I was talking about Florida State.
Right. But and Florida State won that with a backup quarterback against a top 25 team. But let's say you're right. Who are they going to
They
take
didn't
out?
win convincingly. They won.
They beat the spread. I know because I put money on it. But let's say you're right. Let's say they were going to put Florida State. Who are they going to take out? The SEC team? Because I think you know the answer.
No,
Exactly.
it would have been Ohio State. It would have been Ohio State. If
Ohio
it,
State didn't make
or
the playoffs.
well, no, they didn't make it this year. No, you had to keep in Washington. You had to keep in Michigan. Yeah, I mean, Alabama was the bubble. Alabama was the
And
bubble.
you and I both know there was not a fucking snowball's chance in hell that an SEC team wasn't getting in there. Healthy Jordan Travis or not. Florida State could have had goddamn Charlie Ward back there. Florida State wasn't getting in that fucking playoffs. Now we're and the fact that the new contracts for the new playoffs, the Big Ten and the SEC are getting more money, shows that. And that's fine. I'm not arguing for that. I think that we both agree that the Big Ten and the SEC, I think that we both agree that the Big Ten is the best conference, right? When you say from top to bottom?
Deepest, right?
Yeah. I mean, UCLA is going to be UCLA is going to be one of the shittiest teams in the league, and that's saying something pretty impressively. Yeah. So if that's fine. If they come out and they say, "Hey, listen, the Big Ten and the SEC are the best. They're getting more playoff bids." That's fine, but just say it. They don't. That's another issue that I have with this whole. They want to keep just enough hidden and not want to say anything concrete. That's the whole issue I have with every step, every change that they've made. And it's not just the playoffs; it's everything. It's the NIL. It's all of it. Everything that they've done, they've released what you want them to see, and then they kind of play it by ear, and then it backfires. And it's like, dude,
they haven't
just
been.
have
Yes,
goddamn rules.
I agree. I agree with you. They haven't been very transparent with how they do.
Yeah, just like with the NIL. There was no reason that they couldn't have done something where like, okay, hey, listen, we're gonna allow them to sign with local companies, or keep it kind of restrained, right? You can do local commercials, local companies. You now own your name, image, and likeness. You can make money from video games, from autographs, whatever, jersey sales, all that good stuff. But there's no reason for boosters to be given in the foundation, all that shit to exist. There's no reason for it. It goes against everything that we were told was the issue. And that's the problem I have with the NCAA. It's constant. It's constant.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with any of that. I think that is all, legit right there. I think that they need to be more transparent. They need to say, this is how you get it. This is what you need to do. Not, leaving it loose, open-ended so that they can make a decision at the end. I agree.
Exactly.
I 100%.
Because maybe you're right. Maybe Florida State would have been in, but we don't have any proof of that because of them, because they told us, right?
Right. No, I agree with that. All right. One last thing before we get out of here. Urban Meyer and James Laurinaitis up for the College Football Hall of Fame. The
and
class
Nick Saban,
is
former
that's what I was getting at. The class is impressive. There's a ton of big names in there. Obviously, you mentioned Nick Saban. You got Aaron Donald. You got Manti Te'o. There's a ton of dudes that are worthy of it. So you've got a ton of guys on there that could potentially make it. Do you see Urban and little Animal making it, or are we gonna have to wait for one or the other?
I think Urban's going to get in. I think Urban and Nick Saban are going to get in immediately.
Sure.
Laurinaitis has been up for it 6 times.
I'm not sure that number.
7 times. I know it's more than 5 times.
He should be.
I don't know why. I don't know why he's not in. I don't understand how that works.
3-time All-American, Bud Kiss Award winner. You got on top of that, you got 2-time Big Ten Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, his resume speaks for itself. He should be in.
And I don't think that makes us biased for saying that. I think if you just read off his resume and didn't even mention he was from Ohio State, I think most people would agree. I think so. I don't think that's a biased take at all. We were talking about LaMichael James being in, and I would compare those guys very similarly as far as their college career arcs. They both dominated in their conference and their region. Of course, Laurinaitis was way better in the NFL too, and I know that shouldn't matter for the College Football Hall of Fame, but I think it does a little bit based off of how the voting goes, right?
You'd have to think, but if you're correct and that Laurinaitis has been on the ballot for multiple years,
I'm pretty sure,
and LaMichael James is in already, it doesn't make a lot of sense, right?
Dude, the whole College Football Hall of Fame is a really weird. I don't know how it works. They have a bunch of weird rules too. It's really weird for coaches too. So like you have to have a certain winning percentage. So guys like Mike Leach, who transformed Texas Tech, isn't in, or Howard Schnellenberger, who transformed Louisville and Miami, can't get in because their winning percentage. But a guy like Larry Coker, who flamed out. He won a national championship with the greatest team ever accumulated, and then flamed out fast. But he's eligible.
So fast.
But he's eligible. The other guys aren't because their win percentage. It's weird.
The Buckeyes ruined the Hurricanes. Ever since then, they've been pretty much irrelevant.
Well, he was at Illinois too, right? Didn't he have? He was Juice Williams. No, that's Ron Zook. I apologize.
Yeah, that's the Zooker. So I mean, it is odd. I don't know how it works, but are Urban and Laurinaitis, like, should they be in? Yeah, of course. I think so. I mean, Urban's got 3 titles. Great record across the board everywhere he went. He should be in. So should James.
So to show how non-biased we are, James Laurinaitis was ranked a 99 overall. Okay, heading into his last year of college football and NCAA. All right, if that isn't Hall of Fame worthy, I don't know what is.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think they both should get in, but we're not on
Yeah,
the committee. We don't have a vote. Unfortunately, we can't express our feelings towards this. But like I said, it is a deep class. There's a lot of luminary names on that list
yeah.
that
One
could
more thing
potentially.
before we switch off this topic. John Cooper, I believe, made it on his first time on the ballot.
Interesting.
I
Interesting.
believe.
How many
I know
titles
he's
did
in
he win again?
big old 0. So
Yeah,
that's my point with Herbs there. I think Herbs pretty much a lock.
that
I
is.
think
How do you make it in without a title?
there's a lot of coaches that don't make it that have made it. If you look at the Hall of Fame coaches that are in there, it would surprise. I mean, he won a lot. I mean, he won a lot of Arizona State too.
Sure.
If you look at his,
No.
I think he won a lot at Tulsa, and he did a lot too. He was, I think, he was the first guy to hire a black assistant at both Tulsa and I think not Ohio State. That was Woody Hayes. But yeah, he did a lot of stuff. So it makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. No, it definitely makes sense.
He still had a winning record at Ohio State. He just couldn't beat Michigan or win a championship
or win a bowl game.
Yeah, we looked. Yeah, it was like 3 and 4, something like that.
Something like that. It was bad. Not very good.
Yeah.
Josh, you got anything else?
No, but I tell you what, I'm working on, and you tell me if this is a good topic for next week.
Ooh.
I have written out, and I think that we should do this together. I've written out every schedule and gone through and done every game, my predictions,
Okay.
every Big Ten. Yep, and I wrote down what I think their record's going to be compared to the spread
for every
to the
Big
team
Ten
team. Yes, and compared to the team total on BetMGM, which I believe
that's
is
a lot of homework, Josh.
You can breeze through it. You know what the hardest part was? Trying to figure out which small schools made up to FBS.
Gotcha. I was gonna say which. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So because someone's playing in Idaho, and I'm like, is Idaho back in the FBS?
I don't know.
No, they're not.
But yeah, no, I think that'll be a fun exercise. I will start working on my list.
And to let you know, I did have Ohio State winning it all. 12-0. I had them winning the Big Ten championship as well. I don't feel like I'm being biased. What do you have
Oregon at?
I had them playing Oregon in the Big Ten championship. So I got Ohio State beating them twice.
So they beat them twice.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at the Oregon roster. That offense is going to be explosive. They have that Stewart kid from A&M, and obviously Dylan Gabriel. I know you're a big fan, super accurate guy.
Yep.
But man, they lost a lot of that 2 deep on the defensive line.
Yeah.
I think the only way you're beating Ohio State is if your defensive line could smash your offensive line into oblivion, and they can't do that. Right.
Where'd you have Penn State? Oh, let's not.
I had Penn State.
We'll
wait. Well, it's interesting though. Just so you compare your notes as well. I had Penn State third.
Okay.
I had them hitting the double-digit win mark.
Okay.
So I had them taking.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to dig deeper in a little bit of this and look over some of those teams and stuff. So
it hurts every time I write down I wrote down Penn State's record, because what I do is I go through game by game. I'm like, okay. Wait, try to go by gut first. Yeah. Try to go by gut, because you don't want to look at the record you don't be like, okay, that's like 8 games in a row or whatever. And then I look at it, and then I evaluate the schedule. Like, okay, that's 2 home games. That's an away game, home game, 2 away games. Try to evaluate, is that likely or not? Penn State hurts, man, because they're so good, and the schedule lines up pretty well. But God, I hate James Franklin. It's really hard to say that they're going to win double digits. Funny. But yeah, you finish yours up too, and let me know where you come out.
Yeah, we'll definitely I'll work on that this week. And again, anything else?
No, man, that's it.
All right, make sure you go ahead and subscribe, and share everything on YouTube. We need those numbers up, boys and girls. We need those numbers up. Make sure you read all of our content over there on Buckeyes Wire as well. Josh stepped up his game. He's churning out a lot more content, so make sure you take a look at that. as Josh knows, I sent him a congratulations text
Oh
from
yeah.
last month. He crushed it last month. So I'd like to
What
see you keep that up, my man.
what can I say? You motivated me. We had a conversation off air a couple weeks ago, and Mike was bragging about the cash, and I thought, man, look at him go. He was telling me his schedule and how he fits it in.
I wasn't bragging. I was just telling you, you know
No, you were just
what's
you were
going
laying
on.
out you were laying out your day, and I was like, well, dude, if he can do it, and he's got a kid, I need to step it up.
Yeah,
So
you can
it was
do it.
very
It's not that hard. It's not that hard,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
A
I
couple,
tell you
two,
what, the
three
recruiting
articles.
industry,
You could still take days off, man. I take days off all the time. I
there you
take days
go.
off all the time. And I
There
mean,
you
I
go.
schedule. I'm like, all right, you know, some Saturdays, especially non-football Saturdays, family time for me. You know, especially
There you
with a
go.
young kid. You know, with a young kid, you know, you can't always just be sitting in front of your computer or your phone and looking for stuff to, you know, Ohio State relevant stuff to write about. So, you know, it's good to take a day off. Plus, you know,
The,
mental, man. Gotta
the
take those
coach,
mental days.
the coaching gigs were it was straight fire for me for a bit, dude. Like people
Yeah.
were messaging me, "Hey, did you see Larry Grant got hired as DC at a community college?" I'm like, "Yoink!" Like, so that was
Yeah,
fire for me
that'll
for that.
go. Yeah, that was let's say that was the top or the second top. Ah, yes, thank you, Chris. I am falling in my fake mansion. Uh um yeah, you know, it's
Thanks for
yeah. You know, you're looking at, I think that was either the top or the second best viewed article of the month for us. So,
which one?
like I said, your the coaching one, the one that you just scrolled.
Really? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well,
You don't pay attention to that stuff. I look at that shit every day,
I look at the
every day.
daily list. I do look
Yeah,
at the daily list, and it
I look
never
at I
really
look
did. It
at
must have some
I look at
staying
monthly
power.
because I want to know how I did. Yeah, I'm just always
Yeah. No,
curious. I want to know.
yeah, and that makes sense too because some of those are like that Larry Grant one. That one the next day it didn't do very well. It was like fourth
Right.
on the Big Ten, but it must have had some lasting power every now and again. I had a
Yeah.
USFL article like the Ohio State guys in the USFL a couple years ago, and that thing never number one, but it was like fifth on our site for like 30
But
days in a row.
just kept
And when
churning
that
out those views.
yeah, and the monthly numbers came out, I was like, God damn,
Yeah,
thing's a monster. But
gotta like those
yeah,
monthly
man.
numbers.
But yeah,
All
follow
right,
me on Twitter
well,
at Josh Keatley16, and definitely check out our episode from last week. We had Colby Dan on talking his gambling expertise, and Colby is not a Buckeye fan, and he had a lot of positive things to say. So definitely, guys, go check that out. Hit us up on YouTube's and message us whenever.
yeah. All right, have a good one. Go Bucks.
Go Bucks.